Good morning, Cubs. Happy Monday. I hope you all had a great weekend. Today we are reading Chapter 7 of Matilda. Thanks for joining me. Matilda was a little late in starting school. Most children began primary school at 5 or even just before, but Matilda's parents, who weren't very concerned one way or the other about their daughter's education, had forgotten to make the proper arrangements in advance. She was 5 1/2 when she entered school for the first time. The village school for younger children was a bleak brick building called Cruncham Hall Primary School. It had about 250 pupils aged from 5 to just under 12 years old. The head teacher, the boss, the supreme commander of this establishment, was a formidable middle-aged lady whose name was Miss Trunchbull. Naturally, Matilda was put in the bottom class, where there were 18 other small boys and girls about the same age. Their teacher was called Miss Honey, and she could not have been more than 23 or 24. She had a lovely pale oval Madonna face with blue eyes, and her hair was light brown. Her body was so slim and fragile, one got the feeling that if she fell over, she would smash into 1,000 pieces like a porcelain figure. Miss Jennifer Honey was a mild and quiet person who never raised her voice and was seldom seen to smile. But there is no doubt she possessed that rare gift for being adored by every small child under her care. She seemed to understand totally the bewilderment and fear that so often overwhelms young children who for the first time in their lives are herded into a classroom and told to obey orders. Some curious warmth that was almost tangible shone out of Miss Honey's face when she spoke to a confused and homesick newcomer to the class. Miss Trunchbull, the head mistress, was something else altogether. She was a gigantic holy terror, a fierce tyrannical monster who frightened the life out of the pupils and teachers alike. There was an aura of menace about her even at distance, and when she came up close you could almost feel the dangerous heat radiating from her as a red-hot rod of metal. When she marched, Miss Trunchbull never walked. She always marched like a stormtrooper, with large strides and arms swinging. When she marched along a corridor, you could actually hear her snorting as she went. And if a group of children happened to be in her path, she plowed right on through them like a tank, with small people bouncing off her to left and right. Thank goodness we don't meet many people like her in this world, although they do exist, and all of us are likely to come across at least one of them in a lifetime. If you ever do, you should behave as you would if you met an enraged rhinoceros out of the bush. Climb up to the nearest tree and stay there until it has gone away. This woman, in all her eccentricities and in her appearance, is almost impossible to describe, but I shall make some attempt to do a little later on. Let us leave her for a moment and go back to Matilda and her first day of Miss Honey's class. After the usual business of going through all the names of the children, Miss Honey handed out a brand new exercise book to each pupil. "You have all brought your own pencils, I hope," she said. "Yes, Miss Honey," they chanted. "Good. Now this is the very first day of school for each one of you. It is the beginning of at least 11 long years of schooling that all of you are going to have to go through. And 6 of those years will be spent right here in Cruncham Hall, where, as you know, the head mistress is Miss Trunchbull. Let me, for your own good, tell you something about Miss Trunchbull. She insists upon strict discipline throughout the school, and if you take my advice, you will do your very best to behave yourself in her presence. Never argue with her, never answer her back, always do as she says. If you get on the wrong side of Miss Trunchbull, she can liquidize you like a carrot in a kitchen blender. It's nothing to laugh about, Lavender. Take that grin off your face. All of you will be wise to remember that Miss Trunchbull deals very, very severely with anyone who gets out of line at this school. Have you got the message?" "Yes, Miss Honey," chirped 18 eager little voices. "I myself," Miss Honey went on, "want to help you learn as much as possible while you are in this class. That is because I know it will make things easier for you. For example, by the end of the week, I shall expect every one of you to know the 2 times table by heart. And in a year's time, I hope you will know all multiplication tables up to 12. It will help you enormously if you do. Now then, do any of you happen to have learned the 2 times table already?" Matilda put up her hand. She was the only one. Miss Honey looked carefully at the tiny girl with dark hair. Wonderful, she said. Please stand up and recite as much of it as you can. Matilda stood up and began to say the 2 times table. When she got to twice 12 is 24, she didn't stop. She went right on with twice 13 is 26, twice 14 is 28. Stop, Miss Honey said. She had been listening slightly spellbound to this smooth recital, and now she said, How far can you go? How far, Matilda said. Well, I don't really know, Miss Honey. For quite a long time, for quite a long way, I think. Miss Honey took a few moments to let this curious statement sink in. You mean, she said, you could tell me that 2 times 28 is? Yes, Miss Honey. What is it? 56. What about something much harder, like 2 times 487? Could you tell me that? I think so. Why, it's 907. Oh, what is it then? 974, Matilda said. She spoke quietly and politely and without any sign of showing off. Miss Honey gazed at Matilda with absolute amazement, but when next she spoke, she kept her voice level. This is really splendid, she said. But of course, multiplying by 2 is a lot easier than some of the bigger numbers. What about the other multiplication tables? Do you know all those? I think so, Miss Honey. I think I do. Well, how many do you know, Matilda? Do you know all the way up to 12? Yes, Miss Honey. What are 12 sevens? 84, Matilda said. Miss Honey paused and leaned back in her chair behind the plain table that stood in the middle of the floor. She was considerably shaken by this exchange, but took care not to show it. She had never come across a 5-year-old, or indeed a 10-year-old, who could multiply with such facility. I hope the rest of the class are listening. Matilda's a very lucky girl. Was it your mother that taught you? No, Miss Honey, it wasn't. You must have a great father then. No, Miss Honey, my father didn't teach me. You mean you taught yourself? I don't quite know, Matilda said truthfully. It's just that I don't find it very difficult to multiply one number by another. Miss Honey took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She looked again at the small girl with bright eyes standing beside her desk, so sensible and solemn. You say you don't find it difficult to multiply one number by another? Could you try to explain that? Oh dear, Matilda said, I'm not really sure. For instance, Miss Honey said, if I asked you to multiply 14 by 19, no, that's too difficult. It's 266, Matilda said. Miss Honey stared at her. Then she picked up a pencil and quickly worked out the sum on a piece of paper. What did you say it was, she said. 266, Matilda said. Miss Honey put down her pencil and removed her spectacles and began to polish the lenses with a piece of tissue. The class remained quiet, watching her and waiting for what was coming next. Matilda was still standing up beside her desk. Now tell me, Matilda, Miss Honey said. Try to tell me exactly what goes on inside your head. When you get to a multiplication like that, you do. You obviously have to work it out in some way, but you seem able to arrive at the answer almost instantly. Take one you've just done, 14 multiplied by 19. I simply put the 14 down in my head and multiplied times 19. I'm afraid I don't know how else to explain it. I've always said to myself that if a little pocket calculator can do it, why shouldn't I? Why not indeed, Miss Honey said. The human brain is amazing. I think it's a lot better than a lump of metal, Matilda said. That's all a calculator is. How right you are, Miss Honey said. Pocket calculators are not allowed in this school anyway. Miss Honey was feeling quite quivery. There was no doubt in her mind that she had met a truly extraordinary math brain, and words like child genius and prodigy went fitting through her head. She knew that these sort of wonders do pop up in the world from time to time, but only once or twice in 100 years. After all, Mozart was only 5 when he started composing for the piano, and look what happened to him. It's not fair, Lavender said. How can she do it? And we can't. Don't worry, Lavender. You'll soon catch up, Miss Honey said. At this point, Miss Honey could not resist the temptation of exploring still further the mind of this astonishing child. Spell cat, Nigel. Nigel spelled it. Miss Honey now decided to ask a question that normally she would not have dreamed of asking on the first day of school. I wonder, she said, I wonder whether any of you three who know how to spell cat have learned to read a whole group of words when they are strung together in a sentence. I have, Nigel said. So have I, Lavender said. Can you tell me what this says, Nigel? She asked. That's too hard. Lavender? The first word is I. Matilda? Go ahead. Matilda read the sentence without any hesitation. That really is very good indeed. How much can you read, Matilda? I think I can read most things, Miss Honey, although I'm afraid I can't always understand the meanings. Miss Honey got to her feet and walked smartly out of the room, but was back in 30 seconds carrying a thick book. She opened it at random and placed it on Matilda's desk. This is a book of humorous poetry, she said. See if you can read it. An epicure dining at Crewe found a rather large mouse in his stew. Cried the waiter, don't shout and wave it about or the rest will be wanting one too. Several children saw the funny side of the rhyme and laughed. Miss Honey said, Do you know what an epicure is, Matilda? It is someone who is dainty with his eating, Matilda said. That is correct, Miss Honey said. And do you happen to know what this particular type of poetry is called? It's called a limerick, Matilda said. It's a famous one, Miss Honey said, picking up the book and returning to her table in front of the class. A witty limerick is very hard to write. I know, Matilda said. I've tried quite a few times, but mine are never any good. You have you, Miss Honey? Said, more startled than ever. Well, Matilda, I would very much like to hear one of these limericks you have written. Could you remember one for us? Well, Matilda said, hesitating, I've actually been trying to make one up about you, Miss Honey, while we've been sitting here. About me? Miss Honey cried. Well, we certainly got to hear one, that is. I don't think I want to say it, Miss Honey. Please tell it. I promise I won't mind. I think you will, Miss Honey. How do you know my first name? I heard another teacher calling you by it just before we came in. I insist upon hearing the limerick, Miss Honey said. Matilda stood up. The thing we all ask about Jenny is, surely there cannot be many young girls in this place with so lovely a face. The answer to that is not any. The whole of Miss Honey's pale and a pleasant face blushed a brilliant scarlet. Then once again she smiled. It was much broader. It was a smile of pleasure. Why, thank you, Matilda, she said, smiling. Although it is not true, it is really a very good limerick. Oh, dear. From the third row of desks, Lavender said, It's good. I like it. It's true as well, said Nigel. Already the whole class had begun to warm towards Miss Honey. Who taught you to read, Matilda? I taught myself, Miss Honey. And have you read any books all by yourself? I've read all the ones that are in the public library. And did you like them? Some of them. Which one did you like the most? I think I liked The Lion, The Witch, and The Wardrobe, Matilda said. I think Mr. C. Lewis is a very good writer, but he has one failing. There are no funny bits in his books. You are right there, Miss Honey said. Do you think that all children's books ought to have funny bits in them? I do, Matilda said. Children are not so serious as grown-ups, and they love to laugh. At that moment, the bell in the corridor sounded for the end of class. That's the end of Chapter 7, boys and girls. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.